Welcome to the Alpha Human Podcast. My name is Lawrence Rosenberg, and today's guest is Bob Lockett. Bob is the Chief People Officer at Schnucks Markets, where he leads the people, culture, and talent strategy for one of the most iconic family-owned grocery retailers in the country. Bob has spent more than 25 years in human resource leadership with senior roles across organizations including ADP, First Data, Limited Brands, Haraz, Frito-Lay. But before his corporate career, Bob graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point and served nearly 10 years on active duty as a U.S. Army Field Artillery officer. He held key leadership roles, including platoon leader, staff officer, and battery commander. He commanded a unit of 135 soldiers and served in the Gulf War during Operation Desert Storm. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lawrence. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to have a discussion about leadership and about how we apply the things that we learned in the military to the corporate environment.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. I think our audience is going to learn a lot. I think what makes your perspective so valuable, Bob, to our audience is that you've experienced leadership from multiple angles, right? So leading soldiers in uniform, helping junior military officers transition into Fortune 1000 companies, and then spending much of your career helping major organizations build the leaders and the culture, the standards, and the people systems required to perform under pressure. But I'd love to begin with your story, right? Like where did you grow up? What shaped you early on? And what ultimately put you on the path toward West Point and military service?
Lawrence, that's a very interesting story that I can tell. It'll take me about 3 hours. The older I get, the longer it takes to tell that story. But I'm from very humble beginnings. My hometown is actually East St. Louis, Illinois, and I tell people it's a great place to be from. It was a great character building time in my life for sure. And just to give you a little bit of, the personal influence that happened, my dad passed away when I was 11 years old. He had stomach cancer, but he was a World War II vet and he had enlisted in the Navy at the age of 14. What
Wow.
was also very interesting about that, he served in the Pacific. And, of course, during that time, if you were black, you could only be a cook or a stevedore. And he was a cook because he wasn't big in stature. But his experiences from those days when I came about, he always shared those experiences about how he loved his time in the Navy, despite the fact that it was a segregated service. But he also talked about one person that he revered, and that was General Douglas MacArthur.
Mm,
And as MacArthur to him was a legend because he was in the Pacific, and MacArthur, the famous walk on water thing and all that,
mm.
really influenced my dad. The other interesting thing about how the military came into play for me was my oldest sister, after my dad had passed away, had a dream one night that I went to a military school. And I go, well, there is no way I'm going to go to any military school. And lo and behold, she had such an influence on my life. God rest her soul. She passed away of breast cancer about 5 or 6 years ago. And we broke out the Google of the day, which was the Encyclopedia Britannica, and said, hey, by the way, let's look at the schools. I said, well, I have one condition. There has to be girls there. I can't go to a school with all guys. And I didn't understand the construct at the time.
Right.
Ironically, my youngest son attends an all-boys Catholic school, which I think is pretty, telling of how much I've evolved. So we picked two schools, and one was Missouri Military Academy, the other was Culver Military Academy.
Okay.
So what I appreciated about that experience coming from East St. Louis was the fact that it was a meritocracy. If I did well, I was rewarded. If I did poorly, I was held accountable to get better outcomes. And
Mm,
so that stuck with me. And when I went back to East St. Louis, because I stayed at that school for a year,
okay.
my path was pretty much set. I knew that I wanted to go to a service academy. And as I had the conversations, I initially was going to go to the Air Force Academy to be a pilot, but I had this problem with my ears and I didn't pass the physical. So I had a gentleman that came from West Point and said to me, You should apply to all the service academies if you made the decision that this is what you want to do. And based on his influence, I was like, there's no question then that I want to go to West Point. And so for me, that's how it landed and I got there. And I got to tell you, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. I think, what was that? The Tale of Two Cities.
Yes.
So it was, yeah, I got to tell you, from an experience standpoint, nobody loves it when you're there, but when you look back on it, over the last 40 years, and by the way, this is my 40-year reunion at the Academy, I think about the relationships that I formed. I think about the ability to learn how to think and solve problems using multiple techniques was really important as you think about it. So everything's not a math equation. There are some emotional components of things that you have to understand how to do and how to solve. And the people equation was really important. So for me, it was the best of all worlds. I got a chance to do things academically, athletically, as well as think about the future of what I wanted to be, values and principles. That honor code at West Point still resonates with me to this day. And my class motto, courage never quits. Even in my darkest hours and times, whether it's personal things that I'm going through or military things or even my corporate jobs, I always refer back to that and remember that I have a responsibility to lead and I have a responsibility to show courage when others feel like they don't have the courage to complete it. So for me, courage never quits. And that's my class motto. I have it as a tattoo, believe it or not. It's on my class ring. That's how important it is to me in my life.
Amazing. That's powerful. I love the motto. I love it. Um, the military, I find, is often where leaders truly get to come of age
Yes.
because, they have a chance to test ideas with people from every walk of life. What did that experience teach you about connecting with people, understanding what motivates them, kind of bringing very different people together around a common mission?
Absolutely. Lawrence, here's what I will tell you. The real learning, I view West Point as the leadership institute, leadership academy. You go to West Point, you learn the concepts about leader, but now you've got to go apply it in the real world. The true application of leadership from West Point happens in the Army. And for me, being a young platoon leader and learning that you can't just tell people what to do. You've got to understand what motivates them. You've got to provide the inspiration that they need, and you got to keep them focused on the things that are important that they've got to deliver. And I got to tell you, for me, from my humble beginnings, being able to interact with people from every walk of life and realizing that we all have this one thing in common, that we love this country, we care about what we're doing, and we care about each other. And that was the real lesson. And once my soldiers and NCOs and other officers realized how much we cared about each other, there was nothing that we couldn't do.
Mm,
So, coming of age as a young person and being in a system that allows you to take on a tremendous amount of responsibility at a very young age is critically important for success. If I had my druthers, I'd have everyone in the U.S. who was able serve in the military in some branch because you need the discipline and the structure and the routines. I talk to people about this routine every day and how important a routine is in your life. Routine to me is about self love. That discipline is about self love. That means you love and care about yourself enough to do the hard things that you need to do every day. And some of them may be very simple. Things like you make your bed every day, things like fitness is important. I go work out every day. Why? It's routine, it's a discipline. It tells me that I care about myself. And I think that's an important characteristic to carry over from the military. But dealing with multiple groups of people from every walk of life, it was so important. It gave me a greater appreciation for the needs and wants of others. And believe it or not, I even tell people this, even to this day in my corporate experience, Lawrence, is
mhm.
that the easiest way to get to know people is to break bread with them. Once you start it, you eat
Right.
food from the Italian community, or you go to a Jewish deli and you meet with your Jewish friends, or your Hispanic friends have a set of food, and kids from whether they're black from the urban environments or from rural environments, you learn that people are all the same, that you care about the same things. You may
Mm,
approach it differently based on your experiences, but at some point, Everyone comes together to support each other under the same mission. And I would tell people that even to this day, my classmates are a very diverse mix of people. Now, keep in mind, my high school was 99.9% Black,
Okay.
but my class at West Point, we were about 10% Black or diverse, I should say.
Hmm.
What was beautiful about this, those are my brothers and sisters that I went to the academy with. We served together. We were stationed in similar places. We had mutual friends, and we were in each other's weddings, and we were all friends, and we cared about each other at a much deeper level because we had a shared experience that transcends where you're from and who your family is and the like. And that was beautiful. Now, I had some really wealthy friends too,
Okay.
that exposed me to things I had never even thought about. Golf, going skiing, all the things that you take for granted, not like ski and golf all the time.
Yeah.
But the beauty was the exposure to these things and challenging my thinking and being open to trying something new, which I think we all should try and do in our lifetime.
Yeah, you talk about exposure, you talk about getting to do things, real things with people. Every, food brings everyone together. That's the thing about the military, right? It doesn't build leaders only through classroom instruction, like a lot of corporate environments. Yeah, it builds leaders through experience. Yeah, I'm curious, what does the military understand about developing leaders that many organizations miss?
Yeah, I would say, Lawrence, it's really about the fundamental principle of you've got to lead people in a very difficult environment. And the best way to get you to understand that, number one, is that you have to learn more about self.
Okay.
The premise of leadership is really about how do I learn about myself? How do I think about these things? And how do I live by a set of values and principles that I will not compromise under any circumstance? That's the fundamental piece of it. The other piece of it is your ability to care for people. And in the military, most folks that have served, there's an old phrase that many of us learned years ago: mission first, people always.
Mm.
Why is that so important? Well, you can't accomplish the mission by yourself. You need people in order to do that. Now, I'm going to give you, a peek under how I think about leadership. Many books have been written about the qualities of leaders, and we read books about Colin Powell, and we'll read books about Abraham Lincoln and when he talked about the team of rivals. Or if you go back, to Ulysses S. Grant, and many people have read his memoirs about leadership. But what we miss out on is that you cannot be a leader if you don't have people that follow you. And so I talk about leadership as a system
Okay.
that if you're a great leader, what you do is that you build a team of people who have complementary skills. And in days gone by, yes, the leader may have been the smartest person. They may have had access to all of the information. But now that information is democratized, you've got to think differently about how do I become the most effective leader? And the premise of getting results through people still applies, but you have to do it in a much more collaborative fashion. And so this system of leadership only works when you have followers as well. So I don't have to be the smartest, but I might have to ask the right questions. I might be able to rely on some of my intuition to think about a problem differently, or I might just challenge conventional wisdom and say, we're going to go out and do something. And remember, it happens because the team is there, not because of me as an individual. And that's where I think this idea of servant leadership is critically important, that I can be the guy in charge.
Hmm.
And I want to take the accountability for things that happen, but at the same time, I have to rely on my people in order to do everything. And I mean, think about it. Corporate structures are very similar to what happens in the military. The military used to have what was called a task force, specifically in the Army, where you had an artillery guy, you had an infantry person or a tanker, you had the chemical person, you had the intel person. So you had a team of people working together to achieve the outcomes. There was perhaps one person in charge, but that person couldn't be successful without the team.
Mm.
Apply that same thinking in the corporate world. Well, you don't want to have a team full of HR people trying to do financial deals, right? So you need an HR person. You may need a finance person. You need an operations person. You need a marketing person. So that idea of that combined team is really important because the skills are complementary when you really think about it, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, very powerful. You gotta find those right puzzle pieces to be able to fit, the people together so that you can develop that unit integrity, right? That team.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. So I guess okay, so two things. The first, and I'll come back to leadership for a second, but in looking at because right that in order in order to be a leader, you need to have people who are going to follow. Let's talk about those on the team who follow let's say a good leader, let alone a great leader. What makes a good teammate? Right? You got to have great followers and a great leader. So what makes a great follower?
Yeah, I think it starts with trust. And I'll say this because and it's trust is bi-directional, Lawrence.
Okay.
The team has to trust and believe that you have their best interests at heart. And if they trust and believe that, then the likelihood of them following you is pretty high. When there is a lack of trust, when you think the leader is all about self, then there's a likelihood that you may not follow them.
Right.
So I've always, taken this approach that I think it's important for people to understand what my objectives are. My objective, is something that Zig Ziglar said years ago. Uh, I can, my success in life is basically, I'm paraphrasing, of course,
Hmm.
is dependent upon your success. I can get
Right.
everything I want in life by making sure you get what you want. And
Wow.
so, again, it ties into this construct of servant leadership. So, if your people believe that, if they believe that you're going to always look out for their best interest and have their backs, then they'll be great followers. They'll bring, solutions to it because the one thing that I don't like is when you bring me the problem and you put the problem on my desk and I'm going, no, 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 no. You've got to come with a solution to the problem. And now I'm challenging them to think differently. And if they can't get there, then I can help them think and grow in order to solve that problem. So I think it's really, number one, it starts with trust. The
Okay.
second thing is having people bought into a set of guiding principles. Everywhere I go, I create a set of guiding principles of how we operate. I start with the mission. I'm sorry. I start with a vision about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And it has to be something future focused. What about our mission? To me, the mission is closer whole that says, we've got to get this done. And then how do we operate together as a team? And it starts with a set of guiding principles, and I try and limit them to no more than seven. And those guiding principles talk about things like I believe in alignment instead of consensus. At the end of the day, as the leader, I'm going to make the call. As we think about integrity, as we think about challenging conventional wisdom, I always talk about not accepting the status quo and
Right.
finding solutions. And so we create with my team a set of guiding principles. And what you want are people to buy in to that approach. When they don't buy in, then they can't be part of the team. I mean,
Mm.
it's really that simple. At some point, you've got to suggest that if people aren't coming up with new and innovative ways to do things or leveraging data to come up with fact-based decisions, then the issue is, do I need them? If you're there just marking time, so to speak,
Right.
there's no place for that. The world is about movement. Movement is medicine, and medicine is love to me. So you got to keep going.
I love that. So, as you start to notice you've got the great, some fantastic puzzle pieces that you've got that trust, you've got that unit integrity, you've got a great team. Then you start seeing some of the team actually rise to the occasion and show you some qualities and traits that might mean, hey, maybe this guy or that gal can be a great leader as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how. how does an organization, or how should an organization look at identifying who the future leaders are going to be?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Lawrence. Here's what I will tell you about this notion of leadership.
Okay.
In the military, you're kind of thrust into it, and there's an expectation that you're going to learn the capabilities and learn how to lead. In
Okay.
the corporate world, it's a little bit different. I often ask people when I'm interviewing people, whether it's for their first leadership job, or if they have been in business for a long time and become a leader by default, but that's because of their functional expertise. I ask them a simple question. Um, why do you want to be a leader? And you'd be surprised at some of the responses that I've heard over the years.
Okay.
Some people get into leadership because, by the way, it's going to pay more money. That's the way to advance my career. And
Right.
when I hear that in a conversation, I automatically dismiss them. I
Mm.
dismiss them because you're looking at it from the wrong lens. Leadership is about getting results through people. And you've got to have a love and passion for it. And if you don't have a love and passion for getting results through people,
Yeah.
then you probably shouldn't be in that role. Now, there is, in the corporate world, because you're the functional expert, you often get the opportunity to go lead. Well, in the military, if you recall, if you know anything about the system, and it's in every branch of service, you get assigned to do a job as a leader.
Right.
But the first thing they do is send you to school and say, we're going to give you the fundamentals of leadership and the fundamentals of your specialty. And then we're going to give you a chance to leave and go out into the quote real world, the real military, and you get a chance to practice those things that you learned. And then for the next level of leadership, you go to another school and you learn what it's like to take on this set of responsibilities. And then you get a chance to go back out and do it. Well, in corporate America, it doesn't work that way. You don't often see that. In some cases you do, but it's not specific to that environment. It could be very generic. Like if I decide to go to Harvard Business School, or if I decide to go somewhere else to enhance my capability, it may not necessarily be exactly what that company that I'm working for needs. And so my point is, there has to be an opportunity for us to number one, interview people to make sure that they're building leader capability. And if
Right.
they don't have the skills to do it, then you have to ensure you pair them up with someone who has a desire to lead. And I've seen this in multiple companies, Lawrence, where you've got a functional expert who might be the CFO, but not necessarily the best leader. Or you may even have a CEO who is not known for leadership, but known for getting great business results. But you need to pair him or her with someone who has the capability to lead and communicate on his or her behalf. And so I see that working very effectively in some organizations in which people don't necessarily display great leadership skills. Leadership is not telling, it is selling a vision. It is showing that you care about your people. But at the end of the day, you have to get results, but you can't do it all. You've got to get it through your people.
Yeah. Absolutely. A leader rises and falls on his people.
Yep.
Uh, you know, to be that effective, um, and figure it all out, the difference between being able to delegate, being able to put your ego aside, and give your people the credit, servant leadership, all these different ideals. A lot of organizations, they talk about what it means to be an effective leader, but I don't think they do a great job all the time of defining what leadership effectiveness actually means or is. So
Yeah.
from your perspective, what makes a leader truly effective? Like
Yeah.
not just impressive, not charismatic, effective.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've crafted a philosophy that I've been playing with for about the last 30 years. And that is a definition of leader effectiveness. Most books, if you look at most leadership books, Lawrence, they all talk about the characteristics of a leader or the tasks that the leader performs. My belief is different. My belief is that organizations should be thinking about leader effectiveness. How do you do this? Well, I believe it's a simple formula. And since I was a little bit of a math geek at one point in my life, that I always tried to come up with equations for things.
Okay.
And then the equation I came up with was leader effectiveness is a function of business results and people results. Think about this. And again, it goes ties back to what I've been saying for the last few minutes is that mission first, people always, getting results, and people. Well, if you achieve business results and you do it on the backs of your people and it's not sustainable, then my argument is you're probably not an effective leader.
Mm.
However, there are times in which you'll get business results and no impact on people. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Organizations should be able to ferret that out a little bit too. What's really important is for number one, the leader's got to create the right conditions for success in order for you to achieve the business results, but you're going to get that through your people. So it's a function of those two things. And I can look at in organizations and use this as a barometer to say, is Bob effective? Well, what are his business results? And the more we can crystallize that and say, these are the business results we expected Bob to achieve. And then the people results. What about the people results? How does that tie together to make sure I understand that Bob's turnover is low? He's promoted multiple people. He's got great engagement scores. So you can use whatever metrics that you have. But if you think about it, organizations often miss the boat about, well, who's an effective leader? We spend a lot of money on doing the leadership training. Oh, here's what you do as a leader. Here are the characteristics you need to have. Oh, read this book about so and so and how effective they are. And even if you have folks like Ram Charan who used to write books about leadership, but the challenge was, what was his experience in leadership? And number one, was he an effective leader?
Mm.
And so I also had the privilege of working with Marcus Buckingham, who is a guru in research in HR. And there are a few things that he often talked about. And one is that, leaders should pay attention to their people, focus them, and give them feedback, basically. And, and not so many words. So what he talked about, from a researcher standpoint, is what I lived and experienced, whether in the Army or in my roles in multiple companies. So it's really critical that we start to reframe leadership in terms of, what's the leader definition of leadership of your organization? You should do that. The second part of that is, well, how do I know that that person's effective as a leader? Well, you've got to have some way of doing it. Again, leader effectiveness is a function of business results and people results.
You know, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm
Okay.
no.
So that math formula, it's great, right? I mean, it's as true, it's as simple and true as 2 + 2 = 4, but maybe even more impactful in how it reverberates. Um, and you think about leader effectiveness, and you start to wonder, would would those effective leaders of 100 years ago, 200 years ago, operate just as effectively today if you just dropped them in our current state of play? Because we all, well, not everyone, but certainly there's this idea that a lot of us understand about how change over time accelerates, right? It's not linear, right? It's exponential. Everything, whether it's technology or culture or just communication, things accelerate. And as I think as business navigates rapid change, because we're seeing things happen so quickly now that we didn't see 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, where do you see the biggest gap between what the business now requires from its people and what most organizations have actually built the capacity or the capability to deliver?
Well, that's a very complex question, my friend. And here's, and I'll give you a perspective. Again, I certainly don't have the answer, but my perspective is this. And I'll use your example of bringing leaders that were successful in the past environments. I
Mhm.
often think the conditions dictate where leaders need to spend their time and effort. The
Hmm.
conditions are, changing and they're always evolving. So, do I think a guy like Ulysses S. Grant could have been effective in today's world? I do. Here's
Okay.
why. Because number one, the characteristics, but number two, I think he had the ability to adapt to an ever-changing circumstance. And I think the important thing for leaders in this day and age is, again, I'll go back to the point I was making about the democratization of information. We all have access to the same information. So, what makes me different from someone else? Well, I might interpret it differently. I might see an opportunity in the information that others may not necessarily see. So, it's my responsibility as a leader is to say, how do I take this information,
Okay.
boil it down, and try and make something simple out of some very complex things? If I can do that, then I have the opportunity to adjust to change and adapt. Take Elon Musk.
Hmm.
Take, Steve Jobs. What did they do that was really important? Well, they saw a need, and they were creative enough to say, I'm going to meet this need. And how do I do this
Right.
in this ever-changing world? I mean, PayPal's success was no mystery. The success of the iPhone that Steve Jobs oversaw was no mystery. The technology was already there. The technology, the patents for all of those things that existed, was created in the 50s and 60s.
Mm.
And so bringing it all together, but meeting a need for that new market and understanding the context of where they are. I mean, electric cars. Remember, we played with electric cars as kids. If you ever had a Hot Wheels track, that was an electric car. Now, it didn't have great battery life, but the
No.
concept, in and of itself, the technology was there. Now we create, Elon Musk was able to create scale with it. So I just think there's an opportunity for leaders to say, how do I see this challenge and see this information and apply it to this modern era so that I can achieve outcomes that I need to achieve to meet needs in the market, particularly in business. I would argue that the same is applicable in the military. So if I think about all of the creative things that came out of the military, I think about the operations research in terms of planning for what types of weapon systems you need in certain types of environments, to now the data scientist who's created math models that would suggest that, well, hey, by the way, we can get more refined with what we need, or the advent of drones. Remember, the internet was initially for the military
That's right.
before it was commercialized. Remember, GPS was really tested during Desert Storm. And so you've got this, my belief of, at the time, we may not understand all of the applications of things, but what we do is leverage the technology to advance in the future. So I think leaders always have to maintain this spirit of continuous learning. They always have to listen to their people. And in addition to that, what's critically important is that how do I meet the needs of my constituents, depending on what business I'm in.
Yeah. So that resonates. And so that leads me to really want to understand again from your perspective, your experience. So you'll have the rapid change taking place. You mentioned smartphones, and as companies that were never in the business rise, like Apple, companies that were stalwarts die, right? You got
Mhm.
BlackBerry, you got Motorola, and then you talk about the internet, companies rise, companies die. Netflix versus Blockbuster, right? But here's the mistake I think a lot make. It's not necessarily the technology that's killing the company. It's the people, right? So now let's sit here where we are, AI, which is changing things very rapidly. Again, companies are going to survive, some are going to thrive, some are going to die. What I'm curious about is what do you see as the gap, right, between what these businesses require from their people, from their leaders that maybe a lot of these organizations don't have. What is that gap?
Yeah, I think the gap for me starts with curiosity and understanding where you're trying to go. Um,
Interesting.
I don't believe you can chase technology. Technology is always going to change. I always tell the story about, I'm sure people were up in arms when the abacus was created and it made doing calculations much faster. Or when the slide rule came out. Oh boy, if you talk to an engineer who had a slide rule, they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. Now, I know I'm dating myself because I got a chance to see this thing, or the TI-58C calculator that would allow you to program it in order to solve complex equations.
Okay.
I view AI as another evolution in this thing we call life, the human history, in which now we're not only do we have a lot of information, now we can harness that information and get access to it in mere seconds. It can help us improve the way we write. It can help us improve our research. But my belief is oftentimes we chase technology, but we don't pay attention to what the business needs are in a community. So, for example, BlackBerry certainly had a superior product, but
Mhm.
what did BlackBerry do wrong? Well, they fell in love with where they were. And they didn't think about reinventing themselves. You know, years ago, when I was in grad school at University of Texas at Dallas, I had this professor named Dr. Bass, and he created the Bass model. This guy, this model he created was able to predict when you needed to introduce a new product and cannibalize your own product. And if you recall, he was right there on 75 in Dallas, in Richardson, Texas,
Mm.
right in Telecom Corridor. And in Telecom Corridor, what you saw was, companies trying to figure out, well, when do I introduce the next smart, cell phone? And they kept going through this thing. Now, what he had done that made him famous was the fact that he had predicted that one VCS, VHS would outperform beta, and that there was going to be continuous evolution of what's next. But the problem often is business leaders they get fall in love with their product so much they forget that while you're focusing on your product, somebody else is creating a new world. Nobody thought that Amazon would be one of the largest grocers. Nobody thought, that Amazon would be able to get you a product or service to your door um, in mere hours, or in some cases days.
Mm.
Part of that is because we fell in love with the way in which our business was, and we're so busy operating our business that we don't think about the future. The purpose of being a leader is thinking about the future.
Mm.
Yeah, you're going to lead day to day, and lower level leaders do that, but executives should be thinking about, well, what's going to happen 3 to 4, 5 years down the road? You know, who are going to be the new entrants? How do we protect our moat in a way that gives us a competitive advantage? And if we can do that, then I can shield some of the competition for a period of time. But then I also have to think about whether I become a fast follower or not. So the gap, Lawrence, for me is the curiosity, the ability to flex and say, how do I leverage this technology to my advantage? I mean, I'll just use the example here at Schnucks, and what's going to be called the 1939 group, is that we leverage technology like I've never seen in any other business. And
Wow.
I've actually worked for some technology companies, but some of the things I see in our company are just beyond what people would think. I mean, just think about some of the agentic AI work that, you know, a year and a half ago, when I came to this company, I didn't even know what agentic AI was. And
Mm.
now you understand it and go, this is really exciting. And think about the adoption of what's happening with our organization, even the people in HR. We're a Google shop, so we leverage Gemini. And you're going, well, when people put together presentations now, they run it through ChatGPT. We're at the stage of, when we do a presentation, we run it through Notebook LM. So you can get a video that may take 5 minutes, in which we were to spend an hour and a half creating a presentation and walking you through line by line of the presentation. So my point is, the gap is the inability to adapt to change. That's really the challenge that you see why some businesses succeed and why others fail. If you don't focus on the next thing, you will get stuck in where you were.
So powerful. So this trait curiosity, right? I speak to a lot of organizations, and you'll find that their people are missing certain qualities and traits which are going to be their Achilles heel. You're right. BlackBerry had an incredible technology, right? So you look at something like having to remain so curious that you're never so overtaken by your own success or your own technology, your own product that it's so great, such that you lose sight of what's next, right? And so the biggest struggle is going to be how do again, curiosity being, I agree with you. What a big one, what an impactful one, a quality for your people to carry forward. I think that gap and that quality amongst others being present in your people ultimately lands on leadership and managers. So I'm curious from your perspective, how well equipped is today's manager to carry that responsibility, right? Like to be able to instill the right qualities and traits in their people so that they don't get left behind, right? Like where do organizations underestimate what managers need to carry and be responsible for?
Yeah, Lawrence, it's such an important point here. I think as you look at the landscape of leaders, I'm all about leadership. I think you lead people, but you manage things. And so when we talk about managers, that's what they do. They manage processes and practices. Leaders understand the importance of being able to challenge your people or provide some insight and perspective. But one thing that a leader has to do is create the right conditions for success. It is about creating the right culture so you do reward trying new things, that you help people think out of the box. You give people the space to create and think about the future. And some organizations do that very well, others don't. But I do think I'll use this old adage that necessity is the mother of invention. And I say that because if you look at the conditions in which, let's take the Ukrainians.
Mhm.
We're still fighting. They're still fighting the Russians after how many years? 5, 6, 7 years now. And so just think about this in context. Why are they able to do it?
Mm.
Because they accepted the fact that if I have to go heads up with them, I can't win. So I'm going to deploy some new technology. And that new technology happened to be drones. And oh, by the way, it cost me only a few dollars to go launch a drone strike. And oh, by the way, when the Russians caught up with their ability to, for drones and said, all right, we can jam them out of the air. Well, what did the Ukrainians do? This is, well, we're going to tether it. We're going to put fiber optic cable next to it. So you might jam it, but now you got to contend with something else. So it's almost like playing this cat and mouse game, but necessity is the mother of invention. And what you see, the people who succeed and the organizations that succeed, leaders are giving people space to think and create. They're creating programs that will allow all people to come up with ideas and solutions.
Mm.
And let's go back to the point I was making earlier about people on your teams who aren't trying to do things differently. Those that don't, they get wed to their current processes and say, hey, you know what, this is the way we've always done it. It's been successful. Those are the people you want to leave alone.
Mm.
Let them, get rid of them because they don't have a place because they're not thinking about the future. They could be great somewhere else, but they just can't be great on your team if you are trying to meet the need and if you are trying to close a gap with the market and if you are trying to be maintain some your company into perpetuity. You really do need people who are thinking constantly about how do I improve this? How do I automate this? How do I create the relationship so people want to do business with me? That's really what it's about at the end of the day.
Beyond trust,
Yeah.
beyond curiosity, what else do you see as that
Yeah.
Achilles heel?
Yeah, I think there's, I'm going to say this and it's going to sound somewhat counterintuitive, Lawrence. I think there's an over reliance on technology for people practices. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Every company out there has an applicant tracking system, and they post their jobs and they go through, and if your resume doesn't line up exactly with with their bot, then you don't get an opportunity to have a conversation with people.
Right.
Well, there's something to be said about we missed the boat on that. The purpose of you hiring someone is not to go through and let the system do all of the work for you. It's to enable you to do more of the work. And again, think about it. HR has been using AI for a long time. Just, I just want to lay that out because we've been, using knockout questions so I don't have to screen 100 resumes. But the
Right.
problem is we have a population of people that over rely on technology and those kinds of things and process versus saying, how do I get to know the human? So I would argue that the gap is it starts with how do we find talent? You find talent, you've got to talk to people. There's no way that, that what people put on paper, everybody writes a resume with AI nowadays. So how
Right.
do you discern this? And they're trying to game the system so at least they can get their resume to the top of the pile. But if you talk to people who are looking for opportunities, it is a really abysmal experience that they're having. So what's happening is now you're going to have people say, you know what? I'll go create my own business because now I won't go to work for the company because they wouldn't even give me a call back. They didn't have the decency to at least treat me like a human because they allowed the system to do this. So this is all about the human experience as well. Technology is not going to replace people because I don't know about you, but I'm not going to buy anything from a bot. If I got to go buy a car, I mean, I could do it online, but there's something about the interaction that I need that I want. Some people might feel differently, but as long as we have people in this environment, in this world in which we live, and as long as I'm a person and not a cyborg, I think it's going to be really important for me to find and connect with people. This is where the creativity comes.
Mm.
AI didn't invent itself, people invented AI. The internet didn't invent itself. People created this idea and this construct. And I think, what organizations miss in the gap is where do I go find people who can problem solve, who are curious, and who can think and apply things and fit into our culture and our environment versus relying solely on on a system and technology to do it. So I think we've lost that art
Mm.
which is also a gap that I think that there's an over reliance on technology. But what you learn is without human intervention, it will all not go well.
You know, so you got trust, you got curiosity, you got the ability to connect. This is such a huge quality and trait for people to be able, and in fact, this is definitely a challenge amongst modern organizations, is the declining ability for people to connect and communicate because
Yeah,
of that over reliance on tech and systems and processes. And then that ties in with also, I think, as you're describing, lack of creativity or innovation. Again, the temptation now, you said it, everyone's using AI to create their resume to ensure that it gets at the top so they can even have the conversation. In not taking part in the creation of even your own story, does that kill your ability to connect? Right?
yeah,
Because does it kill your ability to create? And so we're giving so much of this away to technology. So again, it becomes so important, I think, for leaders to be able to help their people develop those and to experience, but also express those qualities that you're bringing up to express, to become trustworthy and express trust, to become curious, right, and to help others get the bug of curiosity and to be creative. These are powerful qualities and traits. Um, so when the people leader is asked whether of the organization or they intuit the ability or the need, not the ability, the need to
yeah,
connect. And this goes back to you got people develop, right? You got people development, business results, right? Right? 2 + 2 = 4. Connect development, people development, connect culture, connect. engagement, right? The ability to connect and leadership capability. Connect all of that to business outcomes because we could, on the like you could do so well on the development side. What if it's not translating into results? Where do you
Mhm.
think organizations struggle most when it comes to proving the business impact of the people investment?
Yeah, I think it's such an important point, Lawrence. The what I find is, again, we there are times in which we measure activity
Mm,
versus measuring outcomes. And at the end of the day, your input is important, but the output of what you deliver is equally as important. I was told years ago by a great mentor, um, Ron Parker, who was the head of HR for Frito-Lay for a period of time, and he passed away a couple of years ago. And when I first was, a young executive working for him, he said, we'll give you an A for effort, but what gets rewarded are results. And I go, yeah, absolutely. You've got to win. It's like, I don't care if you scored 20 points in the game and your team lost.
mm,
You had a great effort, but the outcome was not what we wanted. So I think, as I think about organizations and bringing all these things together, uh, learning is an important piece of this. I mean, and when I talk about learning, again, Angela Duckworth talks about this growth mindset,
okay.
that having a growth mindset is really critical and important. But it's also coupled with, a growth mindset means that, oh, by the way, I failed and I got back up. But that ties into grit. And so if you think about people who have grit, who can fail, it says, man, I really made that mistake and I got back up and I got back into the game. Um, that's what's really important. I think that helps people connect, but organizations have to be supportive. But what we have oftentimes is when people make mistakes, they're often castrated and then they are sent away, let go from organizations versus saying, huh, why would I keep a person on my team that failed? Well, if you view it as learning, then guess what? If they're given a similar situation in the future, guess what they're going to do? They're not going to make the same mistake again. I mean, how many of us in life honestly can say that, yeah, by the way, um, I went bankrupt 15 times. And when they did that, you start to wonder about their capability because it's like, where's the learning? And so my
Right.
point is, organizations have to create environments, and leaders in particular have to create environments where they create this safety net, if you will, of giving people an opportunity to try something and fail, giving people an opportunity to demonstrate their grit that, hey, look, I got knocked down, I moped about it, but my job is to pick you back up and give you and reinstill that confidence in you so you go try something else. I mean, think about all of the things that have happened in a lifetime. Think about success and failure. Think about this. If you go back and look at, something as simple as WD-40. Why
Right.
is it called WD-40? Because it failed 39 times. On the 40th try, they got it right. But yet we in organizations have an expectation that people are going to do everything right. Work is a social construct. It is designed for people to be here, to experiment with things, try things, to see if one of those things land. If you talk to venture capitalists, if you talk to private equity folks, right, they might have a portfolio of companies. If they got 10 companies, maybe nine of those companies fail.
Mm,
But that one big hit makes a big difference. I always look at people that same way. I'm a champion of the underdog. I truly believe in giving the underdog an opportunity. When people say no, that person's not good, then I give them a shot. And the two things that happen when I give them a shot, I give them the coaching and support that they need to be successful, number
okay.
one. And number two, I have someone who's incredibly loyal to me as well as a leader because I gave them the shot. And I can look back at my career, whether it was in the military or whether it's in, every job that I've had, somehow I attract the underdog, somehow I give them the shot, and somehow they amaze me with what they deliver. And And I think that's such an important thing about understanding the character of people because everybody wants to be seen, valued, and heard. We
Right.
all want to be connected to each other as well. We also have an ego that suggests that I want to be appreciated for who I am and what I do, whether it's personally or professionally. And when people don't get that, guess what happens? They leave. They take their talents elsewhere. How many times have we seen people be really successful in other environments because they weren't in the right environment for themselves?
Yeah. Wow. I got to tell you, that really struck a nerve because, you talk about connecting the development of people to actual outcomes and results. And here, you're rather than just simply relying on, okay, the ones that, so we're just expecting you to get the results now, and the ones that do, and the ones that don't, but in identifying those who want a shot, who are the underdog, and you actually give them a chance to prove themselves, whether it's with a project or a promotion, whatever the case may be, you actually end up getting someone who, and you talked about loyalty, being loyal to you. Now they're willing to go over and above,
That's
right?
exactly right.
Right? Like they're willing to dig so deep because now they want to prove to you that you didn't make a bad decision.
That's exactly right. Absolutely right.
Powerful, powerful. Yeah, I wanted to mention so you referenced earlier Lincoln in that book, Team of Rivals, right? So I had a question for you about this. So Lincoln, right, famously surrounded himself with people who opposed him, who challenged him. Some cases believe they were more qualified than he was. Maybe they were some of them. That kind of team certainly can produce stronger thinking, but it can also create a lot of friction, a lot of instability, a lot of competing agendas in politics, but also in corporations, which many time in enterprise, it's politics. How does a leader invite real dissent without allowing rivalry to fracture, right? The actual execution of the mission.
Yeah, listen, I would tell you it it's a challenge, Lawrence. I'm not going to sit and sugarcoat this and say that it's easy. Um, but here's what happens. There are two dynamics, and I'll come back to your original question. One dynamic is I have had this long held belief that companies hire people they like, not necessarily those that are best qualified. So if I'm a leader, what do? I want to hire somebody in my image. Okay. Now, just imagine a world in which everybody dressed like Bob, everybody said the same things that Bob did, everybody did exactly what Bob did. That would be the absolute worst place to be as a leader. But yet, most leaders make the mistake of finding people that are like them because it's a comfort level. Personally, my belief is I want people who are different than I am. They might solve a problem differently, and it might create this initial friction. But here's the beauty of it. As long as you have and understand what your higher calling is, then people can get behind it. I mean, listen, I can tell you right now, I was in the military and I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Mhm.
It was named after Leonidas Polk, who never won a battle in the Civil War, but yet he got a military installation named after him. And you're going, that's pretty odd. But my point is, I had some guys that were from the deep South
Mhm.
that never interacted with a black person. I had guys from urban areas that never met white people. So I had to bring together groups of people that were very different. But again, I had to give them something bigger to believe in. Yeah, we talked
Okay.
about they were all in the army, and look, don't make no mistake, the army is not an altruistic place. You've got people that this was their last shot at getting their act together to people who were from wealthy families, and so you've got this rich opportunity to understand the differences in people. I believe, and I'm going back to your point about Lincoln and his team of rivals,
Mhm.
that serving a higher calling always brings people together. If I can get you to buy in to what I'm selling, to what I'm believing in, and you say, you know what, I can get behind that. His rivals got behind the idea. There was a lot of dissent, but even if I look at my team today, we don't agree on everything, nor would I want them to agree on everything. That is, how boring is that in life? I don't even agree on everything with my wife, and we're on the same team. But, that's the beauty of being on the right team with the right leader. So there is a conflict. Now, there's a difference in conflict, having different points of view and having different agendas than not meeting some basic fundamental things like, hey, are you courteous? Do you care about the results of the team and the like? And are you trustworthy? I mean, do you live by an honor code? And if those things, those innate characteristics aren't right, they shouldn't be on your team. If they can't get along well and learn to partner, you don't need them. So that's my point. I think, even with a team of rivals, there is a way to create, if the center of the universe is the right thing, and everybody says, I can get behind that. Because I'm sure Lincoln had some folks that he had to let go of from his team, and others that he added, and he had to do that because they all had to align around the vision of where they were all going, which is bigger than each individual collectively.
So important
So
to have, yeah, so important to have a higher calling and a mission. It really crystallizes everyone's different, all the differences, all the dissent, all the naysayers, all the, the positive thinkers. They get into this cauldron, this melting pot, this
yeah.
soup, and all of a sudden, everyone forgets what separates them, and they come together. It's a great formula for success if you can bring on the right true believers that have the mission and have the higher calling.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely. Um, okay.
so I'm curious in your experience, what has what has changed from maybe when you first started uh, and really started developing as a leader between then and now? What have you seen change? What is the biggest change in leadership that you've
Uh,
seen?
well, it's a lesson about leadership is not about me. That's been the biggest change. When you're younger, you're trying to make your mark. In the military, you're trying to, show that, that you are, in fact, the leader, whether it's doing physical things, mental things, getting things done. You want to be seen as that person. Now, it's not about me. It's about the team and it's about serving that higher purpose. And when I think about how my style has evolved, it's really been about that, about having empathy. Before, as a younger leader, yeah, I would understand your challenge, but at the end of the day, one of the phrases that we learned at West Point when we were plebes was "no excuse, sir." And nobody cared about what your issues were. What I've learned over time is to care about those issues, because once you show people they care, they demonstrate it back to you and give it back to you tenfold. So being an ethical leader has always been part of that DNA. That's never going to change. And I do think. The other thing I will tell you about me as a leader now is I'm predictable.
Okay.
And people want predictability from their leader. They don't want to walk in one day and everything's great and it's a great calm conversation. The next day you walk in, you're over the top emotional, and the next day walk in, you're calm again, and you go on this seesaw. I try and be incredibly disciplined about being predictable. So they know what to expect. They know to expect high standards. They know that I'm going to ask questions. They know that you can't bring me a solution that's half cocked without thinking through these other kinds of questions. So by being incredibly predictable, while many call it boring, I think boring is good. But I also provide support when they need support. And I always finish every one-on-one with a, what do you need from me? And what more can I do for you? And I do that because that it's not just about me. It's about them and it's about the higher calling. And they have teams that they're leading. They're on a different part of their journey. I'm on the tail end of my journey in terms of leadership and in my capacity. So my job is to think about the future and build for the next generation to make sure that I impart them with, practices and great things. I often tell people that the beauty of being around this long is that I get to tell stories. And whether you want to listen to them or not, I'm going to tell them. And because maybe that's the curmudgeon in me. Maybe I'm like the Larry David, that I'm just going to come up with and tell you my story, whether you like it or not. But there's some benefit to it, and that benefit is um, it's a pearl of wisdom. It is something that some nuggets that you will take away about how do I treat my team? How do I set high standards? How do I ensure that I care for the person and for the work? How do I demonstrate these things? And if I do that, Lawrence, what I get is so much love in return. And again, success is not about me being successful. I win when I see other people win, and I can't stress that enough. I mean, I've passed up opportunities to be successful so I can see others get opportunities to win. And to me, there is no greater satisfaction than seeing that.
That's so powerful, so strong. Wow. It's funny. You start when you're younger. It's a cult of personality, and if you evolve, you end up becoming a servant to your people and
Yeah.
helping build them up, loving your people as you love yourself. So a lot of deep questions, right? We've had a lot of heavy questions. Let's have some fun. So I've got some interesting fun questions for you. But the first one, it's fun, but it's a little deep because I'm real curious as to your opinion. Because I know that General George Patton is one of your leadership heroes. So I wanted to ask you something a little different. Uh,
Okay.
there's a famous scene in the film Patton, phenomenal movie from the 70s, right? Multiple Academy Award winning
Yeah.
film. I know you've seen it. I've seen it. Maybe a lot of the younger generation haven't. But there's this scene where General Patton during World War II is standing on this ancient battlefield in North Africa where 2,000 plus years earlier, Scipio, the legendary Roman general, defeated Hannibal. And you have Patton in the film describing the battle to his aide as if he had been there. He's actually standing on the ground where this battle actually took place. And he's actually remembering the battle as if he was there. All of this, as he describes it, he's contemplating at the same time his coming fight against the German General
Rome.
Rommel's tanks, right?
Hmm.
So so there are leaders who think tactically. There are leaders who think strategically. There are leaders who think globally, and there are the rare figures like Patton who seem to think across time and history. Right? Patton seemed to see himself not only as a commander in a particular war, but as part of a long line of commanders and battles and empires. What is it about Patton? Because he's such an interesting guy. What is it about Patton that has always fascinated you? And where do you see some of his lessons coming into play?
Yeah. Listen, I'll tell you the most important thing for me about Patton was winning. Understanding what it takes to be a winner. And, if you think about World War II, he never lost a battle during World War II. Okay. And he challenged and pushed his people, but he also showed great care for them. But make no mistake about it, his focus was on winning. That's the first thing. The second thing was about simplicity. Um, and, we often say, he would say a simple plan well executed is much better than a a violent plan perfectly executed or something to that effect.
Mhm.
What his point was is a simple plan well executed is much better than a perfect plan poorly executed. And I think that's really relevant. And in today's world, if you think about, the application of those things, like we all want to win. I can't think of anyone who comes to work or does anything that says, hey, you know what? Today I'm going to make everybody's life miserable and I'm going to focus on losing.
Right.
Said no one ever. And if
That's
they
right.
do come in with that attitude, there's something really off. And number two is life is very complex. And we are trying to simplify these things because in this age of information in which you have so much access to things coming at you, if you think about TikTok and Instagram and all these media feeds and the 24-hour news cycle and the spin that happens, all of these things are coming to bear. what people really want is a simplification of this to say, well, how do I screen out the noise and get to the root of what I want? I think that was the beauty, what's so attractive to me about Patton, and his ability to say, I'm going to inspire this group of people. Now, remember Patton's voice was nothing like George C. Marshall's voice. Right? He had a little squeaky voice, and it was, and so if you think about the
Yeah,
context of
not in the
that,
movie. Yeah.
but we created a hero. And to me, he was absolutely legendary. He didn't take no for an answer. He had his own approach to it. And at the end of the day, he was going to win because that's what we needed.
Yeah, it, an exceptional character. Just really that old school confidence and strength, and you just got to respect it. All
Yeah.
right, rapid fire. Last few questions. Let's have some fun. New York style pizza or St. Louis style pizza?
Oh, you would ask me a tough question like that. Well, it depends on the mood, right?
All right.
I love a thin crust pizza, almost wafer thin, i.e. the St. Louis style. But who can argue with a New York style pizza, man?
Oh,
Having lived in both places, I know it seems like I'm copping out, but if I had to pick, I would say I love a thin crust pizza, but I love a New York style pizza. Now, if you'd ask me about Cats or a Second Avenue deli, I would go with Cats. But that's a hard one, man.
listen. In a pinch, what's your go-to though? I'm going to make you choose one.
Oh, in a pinch, I'll go with the St. Louis style pizza.
You got fair enough. Got to go with the hometown. Um, okay, favorite movie.
Coming to America.
Oh, so what did you think? First of all, I love. I've seen that movie. I've seen Coming to America.
Yeah.
I can't even count how many times. Right?
Yeah.
I've seen it so many times. Arsenio Hall is the best. Arsenio Hall. What did you think about the sequel that they made a few years ago?
Listen, a lot of times the sequel may not necessarily live up to the original. You
Yeah.
got to keep in mind that that movie was made in 1985. And what I tell people, it's one movie that transcends race and gender. And everybody's seen that movie multiple times and they can quote lines. And I got to tell you, from Eddie playing the Jewish guy in the barber shop, and playing all these other characters. I mean, there's just such a richness there. But I can talk to anyone about that movie, and people still remember it. Now, again, people of a certain age. I even had my kids watch it. And if you ask my kids the same question, they say, "What's your dad's favorite movie?" Coming to America.
Great one. What's the one place you've traveled that's left the greatest impression on you?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I'm gonna say it had to have been Italy. We just went to Italy
Right.
well, this year actually, and we went to St. Peter's, and I looked at the boldness of this, and I was like, wow, this is pretty darn impressive. So I got to say, Italy, and actually, well, I shouldn't say Italy because technically, the Vatican is in a separate nation. So I would say the Vatican. Yeah.
Vatican. Okay. Because if you stuck with Italy, I was going to say, all right, now I've got to ask you, St. Louis pizza or Italy pizza, right?
Oh, Italy pizza. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
No doubt about it. What are a couple of powerful, impactful books that you would recommend people read?
I gotta go with Sapiens, which is one of my
Oh,
favorite books.
okay.
And again, I try not to read a lot of leadership books because they come up with it's the
Yeah.
same formula. But when I think about books like that, uh, Malcolm Gladwell's books are always very interesting to me because he takes the nuances of things and it expands on them. So, you know, the books that he writes, I really, really enjoy. But let me go back to Sapiens for just a second. I really like Sapiens because it challenges your thinking about things that we think we know
Hmm.
about human history, and how all these things come together. And then you start to think and question. religion. You start to think and question the nature of man and how these things happen and what it means to live a fulfilled life. I start to really think about those things. So I would use those two as my favorite books
Hmm.
right now. And certainly there are other books that I've read, but what comes to mind are those two for sure.
Yeah, Sapiens is fascinating. I mean, just the whole idea of how Homo sapiens managed to out survive, outlast, and wind up as the dominant species is or the dominant genus. I'm not sure what the right term there is, but ultimately, um, people would never imagine it's because of our ability to simply tell stories.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just think about that. Even now, we value the storyteller, even if it's a lie, even if they're telling a flat out lie, we value the storyteller. But this is the part of it that really distinguishes us from other animals, because the story does not have to be factual. But we can get people to believe it. And so if you just think about that in context, it's not instinctual. I mean, other animals can communicate, but it's all about fact. But for humans, we can make up the biggest BS in the world and people buy into it, right? So,
And you just can't, and you would have never thought when you looked at, Neanderthals and all the other various,
yeah.
humans that were out there. What separated us from the rest was the ability to create that narrative. So yeah, I agree with you. What a power, that's a very powerful book. What one thing that people would be surprised to learn about you?
Um, I think they would be surprised to learn that I really love to cook. That
Really?
a lot of the cooking that I do is experimental, but I love Louisiana style cooking, like Creole cooking.
Nice.
I love making food from around the world, and everywhere my wife and I go on vacation, we try and go do a cooking class. We gone to, when we went to Italy, we did a cooking class. We did the Barcelona thing, we did a cooking class. So I love to cook. The other thing I would say is I try and stay incredibly disciplined about a few things. Number one, I make my bed every day. And number two, I try and do something physical every day. Those are, probably two good things. And wait, but I do have a good story for you that you'll appreciate.
Let's do it.
And I'll be pretty quick about it because I know we're almost at time.
Yeah.
Years ago, when I was a kid, growing up in East St. Louis, I was playing basketball in this place called the Mary E. Brown Center. It was this rec center that was in this part of town. And I decided I was in second grade, I think. I was going to go play basketball. And there happened to be some girls on the basketball court.
Okay.
Um, and so we signed up, me and my little buddy said, all right, we got next. And it's full court, and we're running back and forth. And I come down court as a little point guard and I pull up to shoot my shot, and my shot gets blocked. And of course, this is the 70s. You got ridiculed if a girl blocked your shot. Well, it just so happened that that girl that blocked my shot was Jackie Joyner.
What?
And yeah, so Jackie blocks my shot, and she that team that she played with, we saw at that time, they were about fifth or sixth grade. They all went to one high school together. They played basketball. That whole group of girls got D1 scholarships and played. And Jackie actually had a D1 scholarship to UCLA.
Yeah.
Okay, so I go to West Point and I'm playing basketball my sophomore year at West Point with some folks, and a girl comes out. And guess what? I go up to take a shot. She blocks my shot. Her name's Pam Pearson. Pam happened to be an All American basketball player and an All American track athlete from West Point, right?
Okay.
So, fast forward the movie, I'm working at USAA and I'm doing a leader development thing, and they say, "Hey, by the way, it's Olympic year. We want to have an Olympic athlete come to give an inspirational speech." I go, "Sure." Hey, David Robinson's not available. Hey, this other guy from San Antonio is not available. It's like, do you know anyone? And I go, nah, I might be able to make a phone call. So I called my sister and said, hey, can you get in touch with Jackie for me? Because I need her to come do this presentation. So she comes and does a presentation, and I was telling the CEO the story, and he reminded me and called me out in a room of 500 people and said, "Hey, by the way, where's Bob Lockett at? I see you in the back. Hey, I heard there's a story about you getting your shot blocked in basketball." And I'm going, seriously? Now he's going to jump in on the joke. So that's one thing about me that I would share with people.
I'll tell you, amazing. Look, no shame in getting your shot blocked by Joyner Kersey, right? I mean, that's like
Yeah.
that's legendary. So just super impactful conversation, Bob. So fascinating. So many great takeaways from this. I think it's going to be super valuable for so many to take some time and watch this and at some point. I hope. I mean, you got to write a book. You got to put, because there's so much to
Yeah.
unpack here. Because we could have gone on for another couple of hours. But I want to thank you for spending the time with us. It's really been awesome. Thank you.
Lawrence, this is certainly my pleasure. Anything I can do to help veterans or anyone else, I'm always willing to do it. And this has been an absolute pleasure to tell a part of my story. And you're right, I probably should write a book. I've been thinking about it. At some point, I probably will, just about life experiences. And it's not all perfect. It's full of trials and tribulations, but it's full of grit and it's full of courage, and courage never quits.
Boom. On that note, we'll end it. Right. Courage never quits. Alpha Human Podcast. We're out.